A lot can change in our lives that feels like it is out of our control. But when we feel this deep need to change our lives, to create a new path for ourselves, whether it's about our career, our relationships, where we are living, our friendships, our education, it is a terrifying feeling. There is this panic that comes with this guttural feeling, this question of, did I just mess everything up? Because what is happening to you right now when you feel like you want to change your life? This leads to the weight of this realization that the life that you have been building just doesn't fit you anymore. And that is quite literally terrifying because this does not mean that you aren't trying enough in the life that you currently have, or that you are ungrateful, or that you are lazy. This just means that you want something more for yourself and that you have changed in the process throughout all of your experience. I have been here too. What follows this realization isn't the feeling of relief. What typically comes first is a feeling of fear. The fear that changing your life means that you have failed, the fear that you are behind, the fear that other people are going to judge you because you want to change. If you are feeling that way, this episode is for you. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of To Be Known. If you're new here, my name is Makayla Morman, and I am your go-to girl when it comes to anything personal development related in your 20s or beyond or younger. I don't really care how old you are, because something that is true, no matter what your age is that we are not supposed to remain the same throughout the rest of our days, throughout the rest of our lives. I feel like when we are growing and changing and evolving as human beings, it is a sign that we are actually staying true to ourselves. So with that in mind, I want you to know that just because you are wanting to change your life path, whatever that means for you, does not mean that you are destined to fail or to be miserable. It actually is a sign that you are wanting to develop and change as a person because you don't feel aligned with where you are at currently, or the decisions that you've made in the past that you are still trying to live out. And that is a beautiful thing to explore because it means that you are getting better at listening to your needs, your desires, and your wants when it does come to your life. And that is what we are going to be talking about today. Let's talk about why this feeling of wanting to change your life is such a heavy feeling, even though it really doesn't have to be, because let's be real, if you're wanting to change your life, that's typically because it's a net positive change that you are wanting to have in your life, but it can feel heavy. And we got to talk about it before we move further into this episode, because we are usually not afraid to work hard for the things that we truly, deeply want in our lives. However, the fear, the heaviness that comes with this feeling of wanting to change and evolve and grow and try something new usually feels like this fear of failure or fear that we have wasted our time, because let's be real, no one wants to waste their time. I mean, I'm a productive person and I hate wasting even like 5 minutes of my time, let alone years of my life. And other fears that often can come up with this feeling of wanting to change our lives are the fear of appearing inconsistent throughout our lives. Typically, we'll want to feel like a very consistent person because that means that we are disciplined. It means that we have value. Maybe it looks like you don't want to disappoint past versions of yourselves, these deep commitments that you might have made to yourself when you were younger. Or, you might not want to disappoint those in your life who have a sort of sense of attachment to whatever it is that you are doing that you are wanting to change. There is this deep underlying fear that when you want to change your life, it means that you are admitting that you did something wrong. And that is not the case. That is an internal narrative that I feel like we all have at the end of the day, that when we want to change our lives, it means that we admitted that what we were doing in the first place was wrong. And there are some other internal narratives that come with this feeling of heaviness that I want to dive into, because we are all raised to think that consistency equals value in our lives. Because when people show up consistently as who they are to every single person, to themselves, day in and day out, that means that they are a person who has a high value of character. And I do think that is true in some ways, but when you want to change your life, that does not mean that who you are diminishes in value at all. Another internal narrative that I think goes along with this fear of wanting to change our lives is that Quitting means that you are not a strong person. Quitting means that you are weak, because strong people never quit. They push through and they try harder and they go through the grit in order to get onto the other side. And yes, that can be true for the people who want to go through the grit because they are deeply passionate about something and they don't want to change the avenue of their life. But you don't have to just, quote, stick it out in order to prove to others that what you are doing is good. There's also the fear that starting over equals embarrassment, because it can look to others like you didn't actually think things through when it did come to your life, your relationships, where you were living, your career, whatever it is. It can feel rather embarrassing to start over because you might feel like you are starting at ground zero or that you are behind, whatever it is. That fear really comes from a place of comparison, and it is not truth at all. I feel as though the younger generations, especially my generation, Gen Z, honestly, like millennials and below, we all have a very unique experience that our life is very public because of social media. The fact that you can go and look at a person's social media profile all the way until their first post on Instagram or whatever social media account was, you can pretty much track and see who that person was from that point until now. And let's be real, social media has been around for almost 2 decades now. Like, it has been around for a very long time. You can really figure out a lot about a person and their life and their direction by just looking at their social media profiles. You could see, past relationships that they've had, friendships that they've had, schools that they've gone to. You can figure out the life path of a person by just looking at their social media and never even having a conversation with them. And that is terrifying. And it really allows this fear of feeling like we're a failure, feeling like we've wasted our time, this fear of judgment of others when it does come to changing our life because of social media. And that is like a disgusting truth that I just need to say, because it would be negligent for me to not bring up how social media does kind of affect this fear and this fact that so much of what we do online is so public that what we might not feel aligned with anymore is still out there in the world to see online. It's a beautiful thing that we can share things online, like go back and look at our lives, but it also kind of reminds us of the pain of how we have wanted to change our lives and maybe haven't, or how we have changed our lives and don't align with who we once were. This is a very, very horrible feeling at the end of the day, because I know that I have dealt with this of being like, okay, who I once was, I don't align with that version of myself anymore, but people could still go through my social media profile and come to a decision for themselves about who I've been and how I've changed and where I am at now. And that is a very interesting thing to think about, how that does affect this feeling of heaviness that we can have when it does come to changing our lives. Maybe you're sitting there being like, I don't need to think about how social media is affecting this feeling of heaviness when it does come to wanting to change my life. Maybe you are sitting there realizing that you just don't want to come across as impulsive to the other people in your life. Maybe you don't want to quit because something just got uncomfortable. So you stay, you push, you override this feeling of living in a life that just doesn't quite feel right, not because it doesn't feel like you anymore, but because you feel like you need to push through and see it to the end because it was something that you once committed to. When you override this feeling that something is off, you are abandoning yourself day in and day out. And at this point in time, the only thing that you can do is to decide that you actually want to change. It is the right thing for you, because when you override all of these feelings of heaviness, of wanting to change but not allowing yourself to, that is where you are hurting yourself, just because you are afraid of looking like you failed, of looking like maybe you didn't do the right thing for yourself previously. It is up to you to choose to change your life now, and we need to reframe this mindset that you have. When you want to change your life, this just means that you have gathered new information about yourself, not that you've made a mistake, because what you have done in your life has led you up to this moment. You made decisions that have given you a direction in your life. It would be irresponsible for you to ignore this feeling, to ignore this new information that you have about yourself, and to not reassess your life. When you look back at the past version of you, you made decisions based on the knowledge that you had at that time. And growth gives you new information. It gives you updated data that you can now choose to either use or ignore. And trust me, if you ignore it, it's only going to be that much more obvious how much you do need to reassess your life and see what you want to shift about your path. I want you to ask yourself this question and see what it brings up in you. If I know more now, if I feel more now, if I have lived more now, why would I force myself to live in an outdated version of my life? What emotions or things bubbled up when you asked yourself that question? And be real with yourself. You have to be deeply honest with what you actually want to change in your life, because I know that you clicked on this episode knowing what it is that you want to change in your life, and you are going to leave this episode knowing exactly what it is that you need to do next, because you need to transition from this feeling of feeling like changing your life path means that you have failed, because it is not. That is not the truth at all. And I could tell you from my own lived experience, I have done my multiple 180s in my life, but the one that has held the most weight for me was not in high school. It wasn't in college. It was post graduation, when I took a look at my career and just where I was at in life, honestly, and thinking about my values as a person. And I sort of did a reassessment, being like, I actually don't think that I want to be living this life that I have been living anymore. I'm just going to give you a little backstory about myself so you can understand where I'm coming from with this episode. But I went to college originally doing marketing, switching to psychology, thinking I wanted to be a therapist, then realizing I would take way too many people's emotional problems home with me because I'm just a little bit too empathetic. I just care a little bit too much about people. And that's a beautiful thing about myself. I just don't have great emotional boundaries at the end of the day. However, then I wanted to switch to becoming a teacher. And I went down that whole path. I had a minor in counseling and social change that I wasn't going to let up because I committed myself to it. I added on more classes so that I could have a master's in education post grad. And I had those preliminary classes. And I came out of post grad. I decided I was going to be a substitute teacher, let myself breathe before going into my master's. I was studying to be a substitute teacher because in the state of California, you have to take the CSET. It's a series of tests. Went through those tests, and on my first day of being a substitute teacher, where I was basically like, okay, this is either going to make it or break it for me, it broke me. I had the worst first day of substitute teaching ever. Don't need to go into the details of it, but I cried. And I realized that I did not want to be a teacher and that I felt like I had wasted my time and I felt like a failure. And I walked away from that being like, okay, what do I do next? I pivoted from being a teacher to a librarian. I tried out being a librarian. The education system is just not for me. I have deep respect for people who are in the education system, but it just wasn't for me. And I quit. And after that, I had no other jobs in sight other than doing babysitting and other side gigs just to stay afloat and keep up with my resume, because I knew I wanted to switch from education to marketing and I didn't quite know how. I was applying to a million master's programs and I got into my dream one. And I also got my dream job after quitting that library job maybe 3 months later. And that taught me a lot about myself and about self-trust, and that when you want to change your life path, sometimes you need to have that absolute breakdown moment where you just cannot take it anymore for you to decide, okay, yeah, this just isn't for me and I need to change, and I need to change now. Going through all of that has really shifted my perspective on what success actually means to me, because I am a person where I created a path for myself back in my undergrad and I committed myself to achieving each of those steps. When I went through that plan that I had created for myself back when I was 19 years old, the less I felt like myself, even though I kept committing myself to this plan that I had created. I just did not want to do it anymore. And it really taught me the lesson that wanting to change your life path does not mean that you have failed. It has allowed me a new version of what success means to me, because success at the end of the day is what you define it to be. And to me, success means that I am living a life that actually feels aligned with my desires, my wants, and my needs. And that is where I'm at right now. I feel pretty successful because I have a lot of the things that I was once looking for, and I am able to look ahead and to see what it is that I want based on those things. I want you to remember that changing your life path does not mean that you made a mistake. It means that you have more information on who you want to be. You made choices on who you were, what you knew, and who you thought you wanted to be. And now you're someone else. So you have to figure out what it is that you actually want for yourself now, because you have all of this new information from those experiences that you led yourself to have. Now you know yourself better. Now you see yourself more clearly. Now you have the ability to trust yourself to take that next step into changing your life. So why should you be required to live out an entire life based on a decision that you once had? A decision that you made before you had all of this information on who you actually are now. Remember, refusing to reassess what you actually want in life would be irresponsible. Let me be clear, not every change is healthy, and I need to be honest with you about that. Because when we are wanting to change our lives, it typically comes from two places. This feeling of wanting to have more alignment with our truer, higher version of ourselves, or it's coming from a place of avoidance of where we are currently at, or our shadow selves or our past selves. And you need to make sure that when you are changing your life, you are not coming from a place of avoidant. I want you to be very clear and very intentional that when it comes to wanting to change your life, you are coming from a place of alignment, of wanting to be this higher version, better version of yourself. So let's talk about the difference, the distinction between avoidance versus alignment, because avoidance feels frantic. Avoidance feels like panic. It feels like this heavy sense of discomfort with where you are at because of whatever current pain point you are dealing with in your life. What avoidance looks like when it comes to wanting to change our lives is making decisions to escape whatever it is that's going on in your life right now. You cannot be escaping from something when wanting to change your life. You need to be stepping into something when wanting to change your life. That is a huge, massive distinction that I need to make with you right now, because when you change your life out of avoidance, it will always creep back in and you will always want to run away. Whereas when you change your life from alignment, it is a lot more intentional, a lot more grounded, and feels like a genuine step forward. It is not as loud as the panic that comes with avoidance. It feels like a sense of grief and relief at the same time. Alignment does not rush you. It asks you to be honest with where you are at right now in your life and where you want to go in the future. So ask yourself this question: if no one had an opinion about my life, would I feel easy changing it? Would I still want to change it? If the answer is yes, that's not failure. That is clarity. When it comes to wanting to change our lives, when it comes to wanting to create a new path for ourselves, we need to not see it as failure. We need to see it as a step into alignment of success. Failure isn't changing your mind. Failure is staying somewhere out of fear. Staying because you don't want to disappoint people, staying because you don't want to explain yourself, staying because you are more afraid of being misunderstood than misaligned. Staying loyal to a life that doesn't fit you anymore isn't strength, it is self-betrayal. When it comes to wanting to change your life, it will lead you to a feeling of success, because success isn't choosing to stay the same, it's choosing to show up consciously in your life. Success is about making sure that you are living a life that is aligned with your wants, your needs, and your desires. It means that you are being honest to yourself internally rather than focusing on how you might externally appear to others. Success is choosing a life of depth, something that is meaningful to you over optics, over how you might look on paper to other people. It does not mean that you have to have a perfect life on paper. You're allowed to change direction. You're allowed to outgrow the life that you once wanted. You are allowed to change your path at the end of the day. You are allowed to become someone that your past self couldn't have predicted. Because guess what? Your lived experience has led you to where you are at now, and you want to change. So let yourself do so, because you already have. Changing your life path does not mean that you have failed. It means that you are paying attention, and that is not failure. That is wisdom. Not a single moment in your life that you have lived was wasted. No matter how high or low all of these moments in your life may have seemed, you need to look back and see that all of the skills that you have gained have led you to this place. The reason why you are wanting to change your life, the reason why you are having this discernment with where you are at only came because the experiences that you have lived. As you get older and as you grow through life, you realize more and more and more that self-trust only comes through trial. So you have to look back at your life and see everything that you have gone through and see how it has helped you grow and evolve and change to this point of wanting to change your life. That is not a failure. That is actually what success is. That means that you are becoming more true to you with every experience that you do have. Because honestly, in my opinion, I feel like we don't know ourselves when we are born. I feel like what we figure out about ourselves is based off of what we realize we are not. And the fact that you want to change your life is okay because you have realized who you don't really want to be anymore, what you don't really want to have, and that's okay. You can change your path to become a more truer version of you. Just because something didn't last forever doesn't mean that it didn't matter. You learned what doesn't work for you, which is just as important as learning what does. You are not starting at ground zero. You are starting from a place of true experience. Experience is not failure. It is foundation. With all of that being said, I just really want you to understand that wanting to change your life path does not mean that you have failed. It just means that you know yourself better now, and that is a beautiful thing. Honestly, the topic of this episode is very near and dear to my heart because I feel like I've changed my life path so many times, and it's led me to the best place in my life that I am currently at now. And I'm very thankful for that. And I know that whatever it is that you decide to change in your life, it is going to be the best thing for you when you come from this place of alignment. And that is really what I want you to walk away from this episode having, is knowing where you want to go and knowing that it is coming from a genuinely good place of wanting to be a more true, better version of you at the end of the day. So with all that being said, I hope that you enjoyed today's episode. Once again, if you liked today's episode, please give it a thumbs up. If you're watching on YouTube, click subscribe. If you are listening on Spotify, please give this podcast a 5-star review and follow on there as well. And if you really want to follow along the To Be Known journey, you can check out Instagram and TikTok at To Be Known Pod. The links are always going to be in the show notes below. And yeah, that's all I got for you today. Have a beautiful rest of your day. Stay true to you. Bye.